What's up, everybody? Welcome to Music Deconstructed. Today we're going to be talking about a song on my album Portsmouth called Helplessly We Watched as the Ocean Consumed Us. There was never an escape. Two sailors lost in the drift of time. Now, if you're at all familiar with my album Portsmouth, you'll remember that all the song titles are extremely long. And if you don't know, in short, it's just because I didn't have lyrics to these songs. I wanted them to be instrumental, and I wanted the titles of the song to signify what the song actually meant, vaguely. Now, this is probably one of my favorite songs on this album, and probably one of my top 3 favorite songs that I've ever written. It's one of the very few songs that still brings out a lot in me, all the feels, actually. It's hard to explain it, but this was my most epic song that I put into this album. And I spent a lot of time not just writing it, but listening to it as I was in the middle, or as I was in between writing different songs for Portsmouth. Also, during this time, I was, going for long walks at 3 a.m, things to that nature. So this song in particular really resonates with me, not just because of the way it sounds, but because it brings back a lot of memories of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. It's kind of one of my favorite cities on the planet that I've been to. More like a town, a seacoast town, but you get the idea. I also want to kind of pre-warn you, like I do every video, I turned down the drums on this song, and it's going to sound a little different from the mix for reasons that I always state in all my videos. Plugins being out of date, plugins not being updated, things like that. But I also turned down the drums just because they can kind of be overpowering sometimes. So it's going to sound a little bit different during this video. But if you want, go to my website, aloststateofmind.com. Find the album Portsmouth, and find the song that starts off with Helplessly We Watched as the Ocean Consumed Us. Another thing I want to say is this song is going to be pretty difficult for me to explain. As you can see, it's not too complicated, but you also can see how it builds up and builds up and builds up. And a lot of times, while I can understand it as I'm writing it, it can get kind of complicated as I try to explain it to people, especially people who don't really know, who don't get involved with this part of the audio world as far as, adding and layering. And this was written during a time where I was layering a lot of sounds on top of each other to get a bigger sound. So this song repeats a lot. Each track that you see here, from what I can remember, doesn't change at all. It just repeats the entire time. But in order to make the song not repetitive, and to give a sense of building up, I just keep adding things to it, okay? I did color code and label the tracks so you can kind of tell what's what. Starting from the top, you have the drums, of course, and then the next thing you have is the bass, and then the piano comes in, and then you have your main rhythm guitar that comes in. And if you look, and you'll see this throughout a lot of my songs, you'll see how I do some volume automation, or, in the case of the rhythm guitars right here, you can kind of probably, depending on how I edit this, you can kind of barely see these guitar tracks, how I turn down the volumes on the clips and everything like that. And there's some automation behind all this. I'm just not showing you right now. The next part of the song after the main rhythm guitars, are the leads. And then you have your, what does this say? Dry crunch. So you'll see what that is. I just labeled it dry crunch. I don't know why. Then you have your drone guitars that come in, and then the last thing you have is your heavy guitars that come in. This is kind of neat how I layer these heavy guitars, which I'll get into in a second. So now this song, my friend Anthony would probably be proud of me. It was written in an 11/8 time signature. It's a very odd time signature. Now, unlike Anthony, I don't go out and try to find my odd time signatures. They're amazing when you can write to them and when you know what you're doing. But I never, when it comes to that kind of stuff, I know. Let me put it this way: I'll write a guitar riff that sounds good to me. A lot of times, more often than not, it doesn't turn out to be a 4/4 time signature. And so after I record to a click track the guitar riff I want, I realize afterwards it doesn't fit in a 4/4 format, and so what will happen is I'll have to find that time signature. And in the case of the song, it was an 11/8 time signature. And so I'll have to give credit to Anthony because he can create a time signature and then write to that. I'm not as good as he is with that. But that's kind of my method to why this became that way. Another unique thing about the song, I'm telling you now because I might forget, is that the different instruments that I play aren't necessarily always in a 11/8 time signature. These heavy guitars at the end, if I can remember correctly, they're basically at a 4/4 time signature, as the other things are at. In fact, I think the only thing that's really at an 11/8 is this main rhythm. And what you do is when you create, for example, a guitar riff that's an 11/8, 7/8, 5/4, 3/4 time signature, and then you write something that's on a 4/4 time signature over that, it can really create some nice, I guess dissonance is the word to use. It creates confusion in the song, but it's choreographed confusion. It's intentional confusion. It becomes non-confusion. That's the only way I can put it. It's the only way I can explain it. The other instrument that's also an 11/8 is the drum track. So we'll start with the drums. Let me open this up. The drums are pretty much the same thing the entire song, because like I've said before, in a song where I'm layering the instrument, as the song progresses, with new layers are coming in. I think I tend to get lazy and I don't want to make it too confusing, so I'll just leave the drums as is. So for the drummer, this would be really boring, but I'm sure if I ever play this song live, if I was ever in that situation, whoever was drumming for us, I'd probably say, hey, yeah, go off of this riff, but feel free to add your own thing to it. So this is basically the drum track by itself. And that's all there is to that. I did, this wasn't the original MIDI track that I put in here. If you haven't yet, I created a video actually earlier tonight on how I create my drum sounds, and so check that out. But with this, I had to alter the drums a lot in order to make them fit the guitar, which I'll show you in a second. The next thing I'm going to show you before I go on to the intro guitar, the main guitar, is the bass line. And here it is right here by itself. And so you can see how that goes all the way across. It repeats. Now, I know you're thinking that's boring as shit. Yeah, maybe. But again, when I was writing this whole album, this wasn't intended to be hey, let's put a cool CD in our car and let's jam to it. This was sit in your room at night, drink a beer, or do whatever you have to do to make you happy, and then just close your eyes and come into my world and just share this with me. So that's the bass line. I'm going to skip over the piano track that comes in later. That's next on the list. I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to kind of focus on the intro real quick before I do anything else, and I'm going to play all this together in a second, because this is going to be a very complicated video. If I haven't said it already, it's going to be very complicated for me to walk you through it, because it gets so confusing at the end. But the next thing on the list is the guitar, and this is the first thing that comes in. About 2 years ago, I was living up in Hooksett, New Hampshire, and I was living with somebody, and I had like a nice big studio up in on the second floor. I had all the amps and everything, and I have these videos on my website, at least partially. There's a bunch of videos of me playing my guitar, and I used to take my Mac video camera and play the guitar and come up with riff ideas so I could watch and hear myself later. Well, this was one of the songs. This is one of the riffs I came up with that actually turned into a song. So it's panned. They're recorded separately, like I always do, and I pan them hard left and hard right. And I'm gonna expand this a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So it's this track right here by itself. as you can tell, as you hear right there, I have some delay going on, and I think I have a little bit of reverb going on too. No, it's just a flanger and a dynamic delay that I have going on right here, and I'm using an aux send for both of those as well as my reverb, and I'm just kind of having that signal bleed into this just a little bit. I've talked about this before in another video I have on this channel, aux sends and submixes and stuff like that, so you can check that out if you want. And so all together, what you have is I'm going to play this riff all the way up to where this bass track ends is right here, so you can hear how they all sound together. So you can already start to hear how everything is kind of doing its own thing, but it all sort of fits together. And it's not as bad right now, but I think you can kind of hear what's happening. And by the way, this is one of many songs that I've written that I didn't have an exact plan for. I just started writing, and I just started adding things that felt good to me at the time, that made sense to me at the time. Some people are better than me in regards, to writing, to where they can come up with an idea in their head, and they can just think of something and write it down. I think for me, I tend to, my creative process is just I'll write a cool riff, and then the song kind of forms it kind of molds into its own depending on my mood. So there's kind of a weird thing that starts to happen as the song goes on forward. If you look right here, you can see my grid, and you can see how everything kind of matches up at the start of the grid. My guitars, my bass, everything starts at a certain point in the grid, but a lot of my instruments actually start a little bit before. It's like they do like a little pre-start. And if you look here, this clip is it's before the grid, and in each one of these segments. Yeah, it looks like every track that I have kind of does that. There's no rhyme or reason to that. It just made sense. It didn't fit any other way. So as far as like, why did I do that? I don't know. If I did it any other way, it wouldn't have made sense. So this next riff that comes in after everything's been playing for a few seconds, and as far as the drums, the bass, and the guitar go, is you have this little riff that comes in here. It's kind of distorted, so it's just going to be embarrassing for me, but basically it goes ba-da-ba-ba. So you have that dip that comes in, and so try to listen to that again as it plays out. So it's like a ba-da-ba, and it dips and then goes back up. So try to hear that. I know it's kind of hard because of the distortion, but hey. Now remember this riff, because later on in the song another riff comes in like this, but it actually carries on a little bit more. So just remember that, take a mental note that happens, because it's going to make sense further on down the song. Now you might be thinking, actually maybe not, I don't know, but because this starts a little bit before the grid, how does it tie into the rest of everything else? Well, here is what it sounds like. Now I'm going to start before this riff comes in right here, so you can hear everything before this riff, and then you'll hear it when it comes in. What I'm going to do is, as I play this, when I kind of start playing everything together, I'm going to turn up certain elements just so you can hear it. And one more thing I also want to add, in regards to the odd time signature and why these elements kind of might start before. Whenever you're working on odd time signatures, it can be very difficult to make everything match up. So you kind of have to put things where they fit the best. So that's the last thing I'll say about that. It's a very complicated subject. And maybe one of these days, I hope, I haven't asked him yet, but maybe one of these days, Anthony and I can have a conversation, do like a little Google Hangout, so we can just talk about time signatures and, how to best utilize them and everything. So I'll keep you guys updated on that. So the next part that comes into play, so you have everything playing. You have your two main guitars, your bass, your drums, and then you have this distorted guitar that comes in. In the song itself, it's very subtle, but it allows the listener to kind of hear something, things are starting to add up. I'm not very big into making every instrument prominent in the mix and making everything as clear as possible. I do like to blend a lot of things together. I'm not one of these world famous pop producers that can make every instrument stand out on their own. And it's not because I can't, it's because I just don't want to do that. So the next part that comes in, it's another subtle sound. It's this little lead guitar that repeats itself throughout the song. And just like this riff that I was telling you about to take a mental note of, this riff also has an additional riff that kind of builds up on it. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. But this is the riff, by itself right here. And I have a reverb on here, some slight reverb, and I have a little bit of delay, the same delay that's in this main riff. So now I want to play everything all together. So I'm going to play everything that we have so far. So I'm going to play it right before what I just played you comes in. All right, so you basically get the idea. So the next part that comes in is this drone note. If you don't know that I'm in love with drone notes by now, then you just don't know. So nothing much happens for a while. Everything that I've just played for you solo is what you get for maybe a minute or so, because I needed time for the listener to kind of get used to what was happening, but I did want to add one element in, and it was a drone note. Now, the great thing about my EBO that I have is it has two settings on it. And maybe it's just mine, maybe it's all EBOs, but it has a setting where the first setting will resonate the note as is, and the second setting actually adds more of a harmonic to it. If I remember correctly, I use that harmonic for this drone note to give you this sound. And that's it. And as you can see, I don't play it throughout the whole song. It ends up fading out a little bit. It's one of the few things that aren't as repetitive in this song. So as the song progresses, this drone comes in, and then it just fades out when this next element comes in. So what we have so far is your drums, your bass, your main guitars, your nice little pick lead the chicken scratch lead that I just played you. And then you have my little distorted crunch, and then here comes the drone note with everything. It's going to be very subtle, and I might have to turn it up, but you'll hear it. And the other thing too is the reason why I wanted this, instead of adding something on the next measure is even though the song is repetitive, I didn't want it to be too predictable, which is why instead of adding something here, I let it go on a little bit longer. So the next section of this song is right here. Now, the best way to kind of compartmentalize all of this is the next two instruments I'm going to talk about that come into play are really instruments that complement what you've already heard. For example, this riff that you've already heard, well, this section I'm about to show you complements that. And the same thing for this chicken scratch clip that you've heard. Is complemented by this track that comes in. So just keep that in mind. But let's start off with this first complementary track. I'm going to solo it by itself and then play these two together so you can see, or so you can hear how it actually complements. And so here we go. And one thing I do want to point out is this chicken scratch with the complement guitar track, and then this distorted guitar with the complement guitar track. They're both panned about 50 left and 50 right. So that's why if you're listening to this on headphones or on a set of monitors or speakers, you're going to hear the sounds. You're going to hear where they come out with their respective speakers. So together, this is what you have with this distorted guitar. I'm going to start a little bit before it, like right here, and you're going to hear this other guitar come in. A little bit of Tool sound that you have there. It wasn't my intent, but it never is. So here is everything now right before this second guitar comes in. So as you can see, that the drone will eventually go away. So let me start it and try to pick out, if you can, this guitar. It comes in on the left-hand side. All right, and so as you also can see right here, this goes on for a few extra measures. So the next part of the song I'm going to go over. Actually, let me back up because I want to show you something here. This is where you can see the transition. This is the main guitar riff that starts off at the very beginning. You can see how I turned down the volume just a little bit. It's at 0. It was at about 4.5 decibels louder before. Well, I turned it down because once the second guitar came in, I wanted to kind of move these guitars out of the way. By the way, I apologize for my heater turning on. It's probably loud to you guys, so I'm so sorry. So the second thing, or the millionth thing that comes in here, so this is the chicken scratch that you have. Now this complementary track actually is a little bit more distorted, and I added an extra high note into this part of this song, and so it's still the chicken scratch sound, but I wanted to make it distorted. I wanted to have this high note come in, so it added some change to the song, very subtle, but just enough to not make somebody get bored. So here is the chicken scratch part 2. And all together, this is what it sounds like. Oh, not all together. I'm sorry. Just the two chicken scratch guitar parts. And all together, this is what it sounds like right before this other segment comes in. Alright, so I turned up that second part just so you, the viewer / listener, can hear what's happening there. It's one of those things that when you listen to it in headphones or whatever, it'll be something that you might not pick out right away, but you know, it's there. It's kind of my intent. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about before I get into the heavy guitars are the drone notes that come in. And I'm going to kind of skip ahead in this song just a little bit because I want you to hear these drone notes by themselves because they're kind of boring to really go over in segments. So as you can see, this is where the chicken scratch song part of the song, the second one, comes in. Well, further on down the line is where the drone sounds come in. So let me play the first drone note. I tried something different with this one. It has more of like a stutter effect to it. So here's what it sounds like by itself. And I used a modulator in Guitar Rig 5 from Native Instruments to create this sound. I still use my EBow, but what I did is I applied the modulator and then recorded the track that way. And then I just printed a new track, so I didn't have Guitar Rig taking up any CPU resources. The next drone that comes in is this one right here, and I'm gonna solo this. And then the next one that comes in is this right here. All right, so what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna mute the heavy guitar tracks just for a second because I haven't gone over them yet and I don't want to ruin the surprise. So what we have now is we have, let me expand this just a little bit here so you can see everything. This is, for a point of reference, this is the second chicken scratch that comes in. I don't know why I just started calling it that, but hopefully that'll help you remember it. Nothing new is getting added up. The piano comes in over this section, but up until then, the only new thing that comes into the song are the drone notes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start before the second chicken scratch, and I'm going to play that all the way through right up before the pianos just so you can hear the drone notes. And then I'll kind of backtrack to the heavy guitars down here and then hit the piano. So there's no reason why I'm covering one before the other. It's just trying to find a pattern here. All right, so here we go. By the way, if you're listening to this song by yourself and you already watched this video, listen for this chicken scratch. Try to pick up on it. It's again, like I said before, it's a very subtle thing, but it does add flavor and you might not know right away, but just try to pick up on that. But let me keep going. And that's pretty much it. The one thing I do want to say, or at least explain, is a lot of my music, you can really hear the drone notes. They stand out and they become just part of the song, and they become kind of predictable with the music that I write. I don't know why, but for this song, they're not as noticeable. I made them so they were only loud enough to give you a sense of energy and a sense of energy and a sense of buildup to the song as it got more and more. So it's not something that really sticks out. Maybe in the final mix, if I remember correctly, you can hear the drone notes come in, but I didn't want them to be too crazy. I just wanted just enough so as you listen to the song, you could feel that something else is about to happen. And you'll also be able to tell when the heavy parts come in, you'll start to feel that too. But all right, I made up my mind. I'm going to go over the piano part first before I get into the heavy guitar part. So what we have so far is we have the drums, the intro guitar, the bass. We have that dirty sound that we already covered, the chicken scratch, the drone out, then the double for the dirty sound where I add a little bit more to it, then the double chicken scratch, and then the three drone tracks right here. So the next thing that comes a little bit later on after the heavy guitar start is this piano track. It's subtle at first, and then it gets really kind of crazy, and you'll hear what I'm talking about in a second. But this is how it kind of comes in at first for this portion right here. So this piano wasn't meant to be a very pretty sounding, very musical sounding piano. It was meant to accentuate the drums a little bit and to add some sort of uncomfortableness. That's the best way I can explain it. So it's still the piano sound that you have, but it's meant to be more percussive. It's like a musically percussive instrument that plays alongside the drums and the bass. And you'll hear that with the drums and the piano like this. And then the piano gets a little bit crazier during the rest of the song starting here. And you can see the wave files, how they get a little bit, even though I had to turn down the volume a little bit, you can tell it gets a little bit louder. And this is what it sounds like when it starts to pick up. Now with the drums. And they're also louder because I'm not playing so high up on the note. As I've explained before, in the box of sound, when you create your music, the bassier notes take up a lot more space than a high pitch note, which is why even though the volume is relatively the same, this piano looks smaller and it looks quieter because I'm hitting higher notes as opposed to this piano same piano, but this track where the piano shifted and now instead of playing so high, it's playing lower. And if you played lower on the piano, the wave files look bigger. So with the heavy tracks muted, this is what you have when the guitars come in with everything playing. And just so you know, I'm not playing anything I haven't showed you yet. I've muted this track and this track for right now because I want to play you everything with the heavier piano as well. So just so you know, this track, and the heavy guitar tracks are muted. So this is what you have when the heavy piano comes in. So again, I've been turning up the volume so you can hear everything. All right, so let me back up a little bit before we get into these last two tracks right here. So the heavy guitars come in, and I think they're on a triplet time. This is the best way I can explain it. You'll hear what I'm talking about, but they don't go with the mix per se. So here is the first heavy guitar that comes in. And just like the drill notes, I'm going to go over all the heavy guitar parts and then just back up so you can hear them all come in. Because you've pretty much heard everything in the song except for this track and this track. And so far we're doing okay. I'm still able to hang on, so I hope you are too. So here's where the heavy guitars come in. This is the first of them. And it's a very dry, you'll hear it. And has a lot of flanger, and I think I was wrong. I don't think it's triplet time signature, but it's definitely not. It doesn't go along with the 11/8, and I'll show you what it sounds like with the drums. Now, from a perspective of someone who's not writing a song that has this weird time signature, you might be asking, well, why are you doing this? Because it sounds like shit. I know, but when I incorporated this part of the song into what everything else that was happening, it made the song very unpredictable and very, very confusing, which kind of correlates how I felt at the time that I wrote this song. It's the best way to explain it. And in fact, this whole song can be summed up with my attitude at the time, where it started off with this nice, pretty riff, which is, I was feeling good, and just it got more chaotic. That's the word. It got more chaotic as time went on, and of course the song fades out, and blah blah blah. But that's basically what I was going through with. That's basically what I was going for with this song. Is it just got more chaotic towards the end, while in some way it still kind of made sense. So that's why that happens. And I don't know if you're going to hear it with just this one guitar riff, but when it all comes together, you're going to hear what happens. The next guitar riff that comes in is this one right here. And that's it. And together, this is what it sounds like. And the last heavy guitar is this. And they're all panned left to right, and they all have different tones and color to them. And so all together, this is what they sound like. And so what you're going to end up with is right before the heavy guitar parts come in. Okay, these being the drone notes. Actually, these being the drone notes, because I haven't played you this one yet. So these being the drone notes. Here's what everything sounds like right before the heavy guitar comes in. And then when the second guitars come in, so what you have here is the first guitar was more of a chug 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 chug, very staccato. When the second and third guitars come in, it's a chug 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 chug. It's like the first note is a chug, the second note rings out. So it's a very, very subtle change. I wasn't looking for anything crazy here. I was just looking for subtlety, and so by adding that transition from chug chug to chug chug, it changes it and it makes it even more chaotic, because now you have this ringed out tone, guitar tone. So let me start right before that again so you can hear what I'm talking about. And the last guitar. All right, so you get the idea. All right. So in order to kind of blend everything together, because, you know, as those heavy guitars come in, it does cause that chaos, but I wanted to kind of not, okay, maybe not necessarily bring everything back together, but I wanted to add some more chaos to make it all make sense. So the last two things I'll cover is this track and then this last drone note that comes in. So we're going to start off with this first lead track right here. And this is what you have. Okay, so it sounds very shitty, and this is probably one of the few times I intentionally wanted this to sound shitty. I didn't want it to sound clean and perfect. I wanted it to have some sort of breakdown effect. So I think I used another tool in Guitar Rig 4. It was another effect that gave this more of a really... Man, it's hard to explain it. It just gave it more of a non-clear sound to it. So when it comes in with the song, this is what it sounds like. So you have that, and then the last thing you have was a drone note that was a very high pitched note. It is probably the simplest solo you'll ever hear, because it's a one note solo, but it really added to the very last part of the song, because basically this all ends and then the song just kind of fades out at this point, right about here. And so this is the solo by itself. Well, the drone note, one note solo. And it does that, and then it ends like this, right in this section. And you can hear me unplug the guitar. I obviously didn't get rid of that, but you can't hear it in the mix. And so all together, right before the heavy guitar, or right before the second heavy guitar comes in right here, you have that little high-pitched, decaying sounding guitar here. Then you have this high-pitched note comes in. So this is everything that you've heard so far, and this is all kind of how it basically ends. So here we go. Again, this being that high-pitched drone note and that decaying guitar sound. Now, what was cool about this is right when that note ended is where I decided to let the song fade out. And I guess in a way, without me realizing it, this high-pitched drone note that came in sort of symbolized the I can't think of the word. It symbolized the height of the song. It symbolized it sort of symbolized like the final point in the song. It's the best way I can explain it. I love audio editing because I've been thinking about how to say that word for the longest time, and I just couldn't come up with anything. But you get the idea. It's basically the song came to a point right there, and once that drone note went away, everything still stayed. Nothing went away, minus the intro guitar part, and then it just kind of faded out, and that's it. And of course, I have the rest of the song still playing here, but you can't hear that because the master channel, the master fader, that's where it fades out. So even though there's all this stuff here, none of that's doing anything. So that's pretty much this song in a nutshell. It's a very, very challenging song to write, of course, and probably more challenging to explain. And if you've gotten through this and you followed everything, then that's awesome. Because again, for all you new songwriters out there, this really isn't that difficult. Once it's your song and you're doing your own thing, everything sort of makes sense. It can be hard during mixing because you'll forget things because when you have so many things happening, you'll forget. But at the end of the day, if the song sounds good to you, then just go with it. I mean, what I normally will do, like for example, for the intro guitar riff, what I should have done is taken that out for the rest of the song and just muted it or just deleted it because you can't hear it anymore. But I honestly feel that sometimes with these songs, even though you can't hear exactly that riff, I feel like in some way the color of it's still going to be there and it's just going to add overall color to the song. But it depends on what you're writing. I mean, it depends on if you're trying to go for an epic song or if you're writing a pop song. It depends. I don't think there's a right and wrong way to do it. I'm sure taking out the intro guitar might have been beneficial, but if I mute those and you hear the song without that in these areas, it doesn't make anything as clear, which is probably why I didn't take them out. I just felt like I'm just gonna leave them because I'm not gonna go through all that. But it all depends. So you just gotta listen. You gotta see. You gotta hear what your song's doing, and you gotta pay attention if something is worth taking away or not. If it's worth taking away and it doesn't affect the overall song, then take it out. You don't need it. You need to make room for the other instruments. But again, this isn't a tutorial video or how to write your own song video. This is how I kind of made my song, and this is what I have. I hope you enjoy this video. Hope you enjoy the song. Hope you took away something from this. And if you have any questions, or send me an email at a loststateofmind@gmail.com. Check out my website, aloststateofmind.com, and let me know what you think of this video, and let me know if it made sense to you. This is probably the most complicated song I'll play. Actually, no, it's not. There's like 2 more that are really complicated, but we'll see if I ever get to those. But that's it. Thank you for watching.